At Thanksgiving, I overheard Mom telling my brother he could take my paid-off Ford F-150 after New Year's. I smiled, passed the gravy, and even sent him a thumbs up when he asked for the spare key. The next morning, I sold it. 52 missed calls. I let them ring. My name is Cole Mercer. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed home inspector, and I've spent 8 years walking through houses looking for what people can't see. This is the story of a Thanksgiving dinner, a text message I sent my brother, and a decision I made at 11 p.m. that my family didn't find out about until 8:47 the next morning. My mother, Faye, is 56 years old and has worked in the same school office for 20 years. She is organized in the way that certain people are organized, meaning she has a system for everything, and the system always centers her. She decides where the furniture goes and who sits where at the table and which child needs what kind of help and when. She has always been good at deciding things. She is less good at asking. My father, Walt, is 59, gray at the temples, quiet in the way men go quiet when they've spent 30 years choosing not to engage. He knows things. He has always known things. He just concluded, somewhere in his 40s, that the cost of saying them out loud was higher than the cost of keeping them to himself. He is a kind man and a largely useless one, and I love him about as much as that combination allows. My brother Danny is 29. He's worked at the same car wash for going on 3 years now, assistant manager, which pays him enough to cover rent when his expenses cooperate and not quite enough when they don't. He is not lazy and he is not stupid. He is someone who has never had to develop certain muscles because someone else has always carried the weight for him. When you don't have to develop a muscle, you don't develop it. That's not a character flaw. It's just physics. I'm Cole. 34. Licensed home inspector, 8 years in. I drive a 2018 Transit van with 91,000 miles on it to work, and I drive it back. The van has an oil leak that cost me $400 to fix last spring and will cost me another $400 before next summer. It does what it needs to do. I have no complaints about the van. The truck was something else. I've spent 8 years walking through other people's houses looking for what they can't see. A crack in the drywall that runs all the way down to the foundation. Water damage hiding behind fresh paint. A load-bearing wall someone decided wasn't important and took out anyway. My whole job is to find the thing being concealed. The thing the seller painted over and hoped you wouldn't notice. The thing that looks fine on the surface until you understand what's happening underneath it. I find it every time. I have never once walked away from an inspection and missed something that mattered. My mother forgot that about me. She had set the table for 7. Walt at one end, Danny across from me with his girlfriend Steph beside him, 2 of my dad's cousins filling out the far end, Faye at the head, serving spoon in hand, directing plates the way she directed everything, with the settled confidence of someone who has never been told the arrangement doesn't work for everyone. She'd made enough food for 12 people and made sure everyone at the table knew it. The house smelled like sage and brown sugar and that specific Thanksgiving smell that comes from having the oven on since morning. The NFL game was on in the other room. My dad had turned the volume down when grace was said and never turned it back up. He does that every year, turns it down for the prayer, and never quite finds the moment to turn it back up. Nobody comments on it. It's one of those family rhythms that has been in place so long, nobody remembers choosing it. Danny had brought a bottle of wine that Faye opened immediately and poured for everyone except herself because she'd been sipping a cocktail since 4. He made a comment about the label, something about a winery he'd read about, and Faye said it was a great choice, which was what she always said about anything Danny brought or did or suggested. The compliment sat in the air for a second like it always did, easy and warm, and leaving no room for the fact that Danny's choices were usually funded by someone else's arrangements. Steph passed the bread basket around twice and made sure my dad's cousin had the cranberry sauce he kept reaching for. She noticed when Walt's glass was empty and refilled it without making a production of it. She has that quality, Steph, of noticing what people need without being asked. I had always respected her for it. She was the only person at that table who watched faces instead of plates, and I think that's why she was the only one who saw mine change. I was on my second plate when Faye said she needed to check on the rolls. I stood up at the same moment to use the hallway bathroom, and that's when I heard it. She was in the kitchen with Danny. I wasn't trying to listen. The hallway is 8 feet from the kitchen doorway, and the house was quiet except for the muted game and the sound of silverware from the dining room. I heard every word clearly. "You can take Cole's truck after New Year's," she said. Her voice was easy. Settled, the voice she uses when she's explaining something she's already decided. "He's got his work van. He doesn't need both." A pause. Danny said, "You sure?" "He won't mind," she said. "You know how he is." I stood in that hallway for 3 full seconds. I counted them. Then I walked to the bathroom, turned on the cold water, and looked at myself in the mirror until whatever was happening in my face had finished happening. Then I went back to the dining room and passed the gravy. Here is what you need to understand about the truck. It was a 2021 Ford F-150, black, 44,000 miles, not a scratch on the body that I hadn't already been there when I bought it. I made 36 payments on it, every single one on time, and paid it off in March of this year. The title came in a plain white envelope from the lender, and I put it in the fireproof box in my closet where I keep everything important. My passport, my insurance documents, my inspection certification, and now the truck title, my name on it, no lien, no cosigner, no other name anywhere on the paper. The truck had one spare key, silver, with a plastic fob that had a small crack in it from when I dropped it on a concrete floor at a job site in 2019. I'd kept that key on my keyring every day since I got the truck. It was there the morning of Thanksgiving when I started the truck in my driveway. It was there when I drove to my parents' house. It was there while I ate turkey and sweet potato and listened to Danny talk about a car show he'd been to in September. My mother had decided that after New Year's, it would be Danny's truck and Danny's key. She had decided this without asking me. She had announced it to Danny with the ease of someone discussing a logistics detail. She had explained it in terms that made her decision sound like consideration for both of us. He doesn't need both. You know how he is. She had made a 36-payment decision for me in about 6 seconds, in a kitchen where she thought no one was listening. I want to tell you clearly that this was not the first time. 3 years ago, I had $4,200 in a savings account. Not for anything specific, just the kind of buffer you're supposed to have so that when something breaks or something medical happens, you can cover it without putting it on a card. My father had suggested it actually, years earlier, one of his rare pieces of direct advice. He'd said keep 3 months of expenses somewhere you don't touch, and I had done that, and I had mentioned it once to my mother, offhand, the way you mention something when you think you're talking to a parent and not someone who keeps a running inventory of what you have. Danny had a bad month. I found out from Danny, not from Faye, that she had given him the money. She had put $4,200 in a birthday card envelope, the kind with the gold foil edges she uses for graduation gifts, and handed it to him at a Sunday dinner I hadn't been at. She didn't call me before she did it. She didn't call me after. She didn't mention it at all until I noticed the account was empty a few weeks later and called the bank. And the bank confirmed a transfer had been made that I had not authorized. And then I sat down with my mother and she explained that Danny had really needed it and she thought I wouldn't mind because I was always so good at managing things. I said I understood. I let it go. I rebuilt the fund over the next 14 months, putting money aside from each paycheck, quietly, the way I had the first time. My mother never asked how I rebuilt it. She never referenced the account again. The matter was closed in her accounting because nobody had made a scene about it. 2 years ago, Danny applied for a car loan. The loan was for $11,400 for a used car he needed after his previous one failed inspection, and the repair estimate came back at more than the car was worth. On the application, he listed my home address as his secondary contact. He had apparently asked my mother whether he could use my address for this purpose, and she had apparently said yes, and neither of them had mentioned any of this to me. I found out when a lender I had no account with called my phone number to verify Danny's employment dates. A woman from a bank, reading me information off a form, using my address, asking me questions about my brother's work history as though I had any idea this call was coming. I told her I'd call her back. Then I called my mother. She said it was just an address. She said it hadn't cost me anything. Danny fell behind on the loan payments the following spring. The lender sent a piece of mail to my address about the account status. I called them and had my name and address removed from the file entirely. Every time I told myself the same story. She doesn't realize she's doing it. She means well, and she doesn't think it through, and if someone sat down with her and explained it clearly, she would understand and she would stop. That was the story I kept. I kept it because it made everything easier. Because the version of my mother who understood what she was doing and chose to do it anyway was a version of things I wasn't ready to look at. The hallway cost me that story. She had explained herself to Danny in plain terms. He doesn't need both. You know how he is. She wasn't confused. She wasn't acting without thinking. She had thought about it and made a decision and shared that decision with the person who was going to benefit from it. The only person she hadn't spoken to was the one the decision was about. That's not thoughtlessness. That's a choice about who matters enough to consult. I finished dinner. I had seconds of the sweet potato casserole. I told my mother the rolls were excellent, which they were, and I meant the compliment even as I gave it, which is one of those small pieces of information that is hard to explain to people who haven't been in that kind of family. You can mean the compliment and still know exactly what's happening. They are not contradictory states. Danny found me in the living room after dinner while Faye was doing dishes and Walt had finally gone back to the game with the volume up. Danny sat on the arm of the couch in the way he sits when he hasn't fully committed to staying. He has always done that, hovered at the edge of furniture, ready to move. "Hey," he said. "Question about the F-150. I looked at him and waited. Mom said I could pick it up after New Year's. He said it the way you say something you've been told is already arranged. Not quite asking, just confirming a logistics detail. Should I come to your place, or do you want to drop it somewhere?" The game was on behind me, a flag on the field. I thought about the spare key on my keyring, the crack in the fob, the weight of it between my fingers that morning when I'd started the truck in my own driveway. "Drop me a text," I said. "We'll figure it out." He nodded. He was already half standing. "Cool. Hey, do you have a spare key on you? Save us a trip later." I pulled the keyring out of my pocket. I found the truck key, the silver one with the cracked fob, and I held it between my fingers for a moment. The plastic was warm from my pocket. I could feel where the crack ran across the top of the fob. I put the keyring back in my pocket. "After New Year's is fine," I said. "I'll leave it under the mat." He shrugged. No rush. He went back down the hallway toward the kitchen. I pulled out my phone and opened our text thread. I sent him a thumbs up emoji. 3 minutes later, his reply came back. A thumbs up of his own. At 9:14 p.m. on Thanksgiving night, my brother had confirmed in writing that he had not taken possession of my truck, had not received any key from me, and did not expect anything until after New Year's Day. I did not manufacture that text. I did not trick him into it. I answered his question. He confirmed the situation in his own words. I helped my mother carry the leftover dishes to the refrigerator. She wrapped the turkey in foil and told me there was enough for sandwiches all weekend. She hugged me at the door when I left. I told her dinner was great and drove home in my truck with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. I got home at 9:48 p.m. and sat at my kitchen table for a while. The honest version of what I was doing is this. I was sitting with the question of whether I was going to do what I was already certain I was going to do. That's a specific kind of quiet, not hesitation, more like the last few seconds before you sign something, where you're reading it one more time, not because you're unsure, but because you want to be certain you read it. I almost walked back into that kitchen at dinner. Right after Danny asked about the key, when the question was just sitting there, I could have gone to my mother and said it plainly. Said, "I heard you in the kitchen and I need to understand what you meant." I had the words ready, but I had also run that conversation before, in my head and in reality, and I knew exactly how it would land. She would have said there was a misunderstanding. She would have looked at Danny and said she must have gotten confused about something. She would have managed the moment the way she managed everything, and by Sunday I would have been the one who made Thanksgiving difficult. She would have stayed the person who meant well and made a small error, and I would have stayed the person who couldn't let things go. I didn't want to disrupt her certainty while she still had the serving spoon in her hand. I wanted her to wake up on a Friday morning and reach for something that wasn't there anymore. If you've ever sat with a decision you've already made and just needed the night to confirm it, stay with me. Because this is the part where I stopped being patient and started being done. At 11:03 p.m., I opened the dealership's website and filled out the Sell Your Car form. Year, make, model, mileage, VIN, condition. I went to the photo section and went out to the driveway in my jacket to take 3 pictures of the truck under the floodlight, one from the front quarter, one from the rear, one of the interior. Clean. Clean enough that the pictures looked professional. I went back inside, uploaded the photos, went to the appointment section, and checked the box for first available. I want to be honest about one thing. There was a moment right before I submitted the form where I stopped. Not because I was changing my mind, more because I was aware that once I submitted it, the morning was set. The appointment would be in their system. I would get up at 6 and drive the truck to that lot, and that would be what happened. I held the cursor over the submit button for maybe 5 seconds. Then I thought about the confirmation email arriving in my inbox, and I thought about the specific wording of Danny's text, no rush, and I submitted the form. The confirmation came at 11:17 p.m. appointment, 8 a.m., Friday, November 29th. I set my alarm for 6:00 a.m. and plugged the phone in. At 12:04 a.m., the screen lit up on the nightstand. I picked it up. A text from Steph. I'm sorry, I should have said something at dinner. What she said about your truck wasn't right. I read it twice. She had seen my face when I came back from the hallway. She had watched me sit down and reach for the gravy and listen to Danny's car show story and say the right things at the right intervals. She had known what she was seeing and had stayed quiet through dessert and the dishes and the drive home, and most of the night before the weight of it got too heavy to just sit down and walk away from. I understood that. I have done that myself, stayed quiet for longer than I should have, waiting for a moment to say something that kept not arriving. I put the phone face down on the nightstand and closed my eyes. If you have ever sat across a dinner table from someone who just made a quiet decision about something you own, smiled at them, passed the food, and spent the whole meal knowing exactly what you were going to do in the morning, then you know what that night felt like. It is not a comfortable feeling. It is not a powerful feeling. It is mostly just a waiting feeling, like standing on a platform while the train comes in, knowing your seat is reserved, and there is nothing left to decide. If this story is landing somewhere close to home, stay with me. There's more. My alarm went off at 6:00 a.m. I showered and made coffee in the French press and drank about half of it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at the driveway. The truck was there, same as always, same as every morning. Black, level, quiet. I had parked it the night before under the floodlight out of habit, and the dew on the hood caught the light from the kitchen window. I pulled the truck's title out of the fireproof box and set it on the passenger seat. Then I took the spare key off my keyring and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. The keyring felt lighter after that, which surprised me for a second and then didn't. The drive to the dealership was 20 minutes through a city still mostly asleep. I passed a gas station, a breakfast place with 2 cars in the lot, a church parking lot empty except for a groundskeeper working on something near the sign. I got to the dealership at 7:50, 10 minutes before my appointment. The lot was quiet. One other car in the customer section. The service area lights were on in the back. A service guy came out with a tablet within a few minutes and walked the truck the way I walk houses, methodically, checking underneath, testing the mechanisms, looking at what the surface tells you, and then at what's behind it. He pulled up the Carfax on his screen and went quiet for a moment. He tested the tailgate twice. He came back and offered $24,000. I showed him the title. No lien, clean, my name, paid in full, no cosigner anywhere on the document. I told him a 2021 F-150 in this condition was moving closer to 28 in private sales. He looked at the title for a moment, made a note on his tablet, and went inside. He was gone for 4 minutes. He came back at 26:08. I said yes. The paperwork took about 40 minutes in a small office that smelled like printer toner and the same commercial cleaner as the front desk area. The forms were standard. Somewhere around the third one, the man behind the desk looked up and asked whether I had a spare key. I reached into my jacket pocket and set the silver key on the counter between us. The plastic fob with the crack running across the top, worn smooth from the years on my keyring. He picked it up, checked it against the VIN on his form, made a note, and dropped it into a small paper envelope. The check was printed at 8:47 a.m. I read my name on it twice. $26,800. I signed the last page. He shook my hand. I walked out into a morning that had warmed up slightly since I'd arrived. The sun a little higher, the lot a little less empty. My van was parked across the lot. I got in, put the check on the passenger seat face down, and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see the truck already being moved toward the back of the lot. A yellow cone set in front of the space where it had been parked. My phone was on the seat beside me, face down. It lit up when I reached for the seatbelt. Call number 1. Faye Mercer. 8:51 a.m. I set it face down and pulled out of the lot. I want to be precise about what I did and didn't do, because I think it matters. I did not block the number. I did not manually send calls to voicemail. I did not put the phone in the glove box so I wouldn't have to see it. I set it face down on the seat of the van and drove, and every time the screen lit up, I watched the glow press around the edges of the phone against the upholstery, and I let it go dark. Call number 3 came in before I reached the highway on ramp. Call number 7 came in while I was sitting at a red light about 6 minutes from my house. I almost reached for the phone. Not to answer, exactly, just to stop the feeling of watching it light up and saying nothing back. There's a specific discomfort in that, in being reachable and choosing not to be reached, especially when the person calling is someone you spent the previous evening hugging goodbye and telling that dinner was great. My hand moved toward the seat. I pulled it back when I thought about the gold foil envelope, the birthday card she used for graduations. $4,200, handed to Danny without a phone call, without a conversation, without a single word to me until I found the account empty and called the bank myself. She had made that decision the same way she made the truck decision, quietly and with total confidence that I would stay in my lane. I thought about the lender calling my number to verify Danny's employment. I thought about the phrase "just an address," said the way you say something when you have decided the other person's discomfort is an acceptable price for your convenience. My hand went back to the wheel. I drove home. I parked the van. I went inside and sat at my kitchen table with the cashier's check face down in front of me, and the coffee I'd made that morning going cold, and the phone lighting up every few minutes against the wood. By noon, the count was at 31 calls. Danny texted at 10:14 a.m. He said he'd been trying to reach me. Was everything okay? He'd talked to Mom, and she said there was some confusion about the truck. I read it. I set the phone down. At 1:30 p.m., my father called. Walt, who had turned the game volume down for Grace and never turned it back up, who had spent 30 years understanding the situation from a comfortable distance. He called once. He didn't leave a voicemail. He didn't call back. By 2 o'clock, the calls were at 44. At 3:17 p.m., there was an 11-minute gap, then a voicemail notification. I waited an hour. Then I put the phone to my ear. My mother's voice, controlled to the point where the control was the thing you noticed. Her sentences were shorter than she usually makes them, which meant she was managing something underneath. Cole, I don't understand what happened. Danny says you sold the truck. I need you to call me back so we can figure this out. A pause. A half breath. Your brother needs things, Cole. You never do. That's why I thought. 4 seconds of silence. Then the recording cut. I sat with that for a moment. She was right about both parts, is the thing. My brother does need things. He has needed things his whole adult life. And she has spent his whole adult life making sure that when he needed them, something of mine was close enough to reach. She wasn't wrong about the pattern. She just didn't understand that describing the pattern out loud, in a voicemail she expected me to respond to, was not going to produce the outcome she was looking for. She was right about me too. I don't need things. I stopped needing things from that family a long time ago. Around the time I understood that needing something from them meant something of mine becoming available to someone else. She heard that as a compliment. She said it like it was a reason I wouldn't mind. What she didn't understand, and what I think she still doesn't understand, is that it stopped being a natural quality years ago and became a learned one. You stop expecting things from people who have shown you they will redirect those things somewhere else. That's not strength. That's adaptation. I deleted the voicemail and made a fresh pot of coffee. Steph texted Danny that afternoon. She told me later, not that same day but sometime in December, what she had said to him. She had told him exactly what she had seen at the table, that she had watched my face when I came back from the hallway, that she knew from my expression I had heard everything, and that she had stayed in her seat and said nothing because she didn't know how to intervene in someone else's family, and she had regretted that decision from the moment I left the house that night. She didn't just tell him what she saw. She told him what she thought. She told him that what his mother had done was not a misunderstanding and not thoughtlessness and not something that could be explained by good intentions, and that the right thing, the only honest thing, was for him to say so directly to me. That it wasn't her place to fix it. But it wasn't his place to pretend it hadn't happened either. Danny went quiet after that. She said he didn't respond for a while, just sat with it, and then he said he hadn't known my mother hadn't talked to me first. She told me he seemed bothered by it. Not defensively bothered, just quietly bothered. The way you feel when someone shows you something about a situation you were part of, and you can see your own role in it clearly for the first time. He didn't call me again that Friday. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the total had reached 52 calls. Then they stopped, all at once, the way it does when whoever is coordinating the calls decides there is no point continuing. I don't know exactly what my mother told the rest of the family that evening. Whatever version she gave them was missing some information, because the complete version would have required her to explain the hallway conversation and the $4,200, and the lender's letter that arrived at my address, and the serving spoon still moving while she quietly arranged my life around her. I wasn't there to fill in the gaps. I didn't intend to be. The cashier's check stayed face down on my kitchen table through the weekend. A week after Thanksgiving, Danny sent one text. Not a call. Just a text, which told me he had thought about what he wanted to say and how he wanted to say it. I didn't know she hadn't asked you. I read it on a Tuesday morning standing in my kitchen in my work clothes with a coffee in my hand. I believed him. I think that statement was probably true. Danny has never been the one who makes the plans. He has always been the one the plans are made for. He shows up, he accepts what's been arranged, he doesn't look too carefully at where the arrangement came from. That's not innocence exactly, but it isn't the same thing as what my mother did. She knew she hadn't asked me. She didn't ask because she already knew what I would say, and the answer I would have given her was inconvenient for the plan she had already settled on. I didn't reply to Danny's text. I put the phone in my pocket and drove to work. The job that morning was a house inspection in a neighborhood east of downtown, a 1960s ranch style with a newer roof, newer windows, and a crawl space the sellers had described as addressed 2 years prior. It's a word people use when they want to indicate something was handled without specifying what the work was or whether it actually solved the underlying problem. I went through the house the way I go through all of them, section by section, no rush, checking what the surface presents against what's actually underneath. The crawl space had moisture damage along the south wall. Not dramatic, not structural yet, but real. The framing had been absorbing it for somewhere between 18 months and 2 years. Recent enough that the current sellers might not know the extent of it. Old enough to have quietly done work on the structure beneath the finished floor. The buyers were there for the walkthrough at the end. A couple in their early 30s, first house. the kind of excited that hasn't quite started calculating what things will cost to maintain. When I walked them through the findings, the woman asked me how people could miss something like that in a house they lived in. I gave her the honest answer. Most people don't miss it, I said. They know it's there. They're just working on the assumption that it becomes someone else's problem before anyone asks them to account for it. She looked at the report. She looked at me. She asked how I stayed so calm explaining damage to people. I've been looking for this stuff for 8 years, I said. After a while, you just see it for what it is. She nodded like that answered the question. Maybe it answered more than the question she was asking. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my mother sent a text that said she hoped I was doing okay and that she was there if I wanted to talk. No mention of the truck. No acknowledgement of the 52 calls. No reference to anything that had actually happened between us. Just an open door presented as though there had been no reason to close one. I understood what she was doing. She was waiting for me to reach, the way I had always reached, to take the step that smoothed the surface back over and let everyone return to their positions. She was working from the same model she had always worked from, the one where my silence after a conflict meant I was settling down, cooling off, moving toward re-engagement. She had never updated that model because I had never given her reason to. I did not reply. My dad called once more, about 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, on a Sunday evening around 6. I watched the screen light up and go dark. He didn't leave a voicemail. He didn't call back. I put the phone in the kitchen drawer and went to finish the book I'd been reading, and when I took the phone out of the drawer an hour later, there was nothing on the screen. Walt has always known what's happening in that family. He made his peace with it the way certain men make peace with certain things, by deciding the cost of addressing it was higher than the cost of living alongside it. I used to understand that choice. I don't anymore, not entirely. But I also know that understanding and agreeing are not the same thing, and I've stopped needing them to be. Steph still sends me a text occasionally, maybe once every few weeks. Not about Danny, not about my mother, just regular things. A show she's watching that she thinks I'd like. An article about something that came up at the Thanksgiving table before everything changed. She is the only person from that dinner I answer. And I answer because she had the integrity to say the true thing when she could easily have stayed comfortable and said nothing. That distinction matters more to me now than it would have a year ago. 6 months after Thanksgiving, I bought another truck. A 2019, different color, 3 years older than the F-150, about $12,000 less than what the sale had brought me. I paid cash, which felt like a complete sentence. Drove it off the lot on a Thursday afternoon and stopped at a hardware store on the way home to pick up a new keyring. One of the simple metal ones. No branding, nothing on it yet, just the ring. I stood in the hardware store parking lot and put the new truck key on it. Just that one key. No others. The ring sat lighter in my hand than the old one had, but that was just the absence of the weight I'd been carrying on it. All the other keys, all the other things. The drive home was 20 minutes. I took the longer route through the older neighborhoods north of downtown, the ones with oak trees wide enough that the roots have lifted whole sections of sidewalk. I do inspections out there sometimes. Good bones on most of those houses, real materials, built when people built things to last. Some of them have damage that has been sitting in the walls for so long nobody in the family living there now knows when it started. It's just part of the house. They've stopped seeing it as something wrong. It's become the shape of the place they live. That's what happens with damage you grow up around. You adapt to it. You build your routines in the spaces where the structure is still sound, and you learn which walls to avoid, and after enough years, it stops reading as damage and starts reading as just the way things are. I learned to look at structures for a living because I grew up in a house where the presentation was maintained very carefully and the foundation was not. My mother set a beautiful table. She always has. She is skilled at the surface, at making the meal look right and the holidays feel complete, and the family appear, from any angle, like a family that takes care of its own. She believes in the surface. I think part of her believes the surface and the thing underneath it are the same. They are not the same. I learned that walking through other people's houses and I learned it walking through mine. If you've ever been the one who is always fine, the one who always lands on their feet, the one who doesn't need things, you know exactly what I'm describing without me having to explain it further. There is a version of being dependable that other people quietly convert into a permission structure. It happens slowly. It doesn't announce itself. It goes one gold foil envelope at a time, one borrowed address at a time, until the day you are standing 8 feet from a kitchen doorway, listening to someone explain, in plain and settled language, what they have decided you are for. My mother spent 30 years learning how much she could take from me before I pushed back. It turned out she was one truck short of the correct answer. The cashier's check cleared on the Monday after Thanksgiving. I kept the receipt, the way I keep everything important, in the fireproof box in my closet. The same box that holds my passport, my certifications, and the title to the new truck. $26,800 on a piece of paper with a date stamp that says I made a decision before most of my family was awake. I still do Thanksgiving, not at my parents' house. I went to a friend's place last November, a couple I've known since my certification year, and I brought a bottle of wine and sat at a table where nobody was managing anything and the food was just food. It was a good dinner. I drove home in the new truck, took the long way through the old neighborhoods, and parked it under my own floodlight in my own driveway and went inside. If this story found you, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. There are more stories here. They don't all end the same way, but they all start in the same place, with someone deciding that something belonging to someone else is available. The coffee on my kitchen table went cold that Friday afternoon. I didn't move to warm it up. I sat in a house that was entirely mine. That was enough. That was exactly enough.